My Inner Knowing, empowering you to find your compass for the journey. We are dedicated to supporting you to rediscover and trust your natural ability to navigate life each day by sharing insight and experience through the lens of two professional communicators and their guests. We intend to prompt internal inquiry that supports all those willing to explore a unique path.
Well, hello.
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 Hi, Jamie.
How are you, Jamie?
I'm great. Well, I'm good. How about that?
Yeah. Yeah. Whatever's true, right? Yeah. Well, thank you for joining us today. So we were talking, obviously, just a few moments ago about what this experience is for you today. What are you hopeful for today?
Well, I've been, for the last several years, really having to find who I am, what my voice is. And I really, in the last probably couple of years, like I thought I was at someplace in my journey, but then I really wasn't where I thought I was, or maybe I was, and then things happened and I just maybe went back to some old ways of thinking. And so my hope is just to kind of explore that a little bit and to think about how, as we go on this journey of trying to know ourselves and know and be authentic about that, how sometimes that shifts just because life shifts and it's full of challenges, and how do we maintain that?
When you were talking about where you thought you were, what was that place as best as you recall?
Well, as you know, the last 7 years of my life have been not what I would have hoped for or wished for, and just the challenges that I've had. And early on, so I know everyone doesn't know, but my son Jake was killed 7 years ago. And I don't think I'm the same person that I was prior to that happening. And I quickly had to do some things to find myself after he was killed, because I had to step into a certain role that I didn't anticipate. And I felt empowered in that role in a weird way. Like I felt like a part of my voice that I had never really reached for and used before came out in me. And it kept me safe during a time when I was very scared, when I didn't know what was happening in my life and my world. And what I noticed is that in the last couple of years, when I went through some challenges, I lost that voice a little bit. I kind of lost myself a little bit. And it was just through some pain that I was like, man, I feel worse than I have in a really long time. And so I had to find myself again.
Even in the last couple of years?
For sure.
We want this trajectory where it's just, we're improving, but that doesn't sound like your experience.
No, and I don't think that's any of ours experience, right?
Agreed.
But but I don't like that.
I don't like it either, Jamie. Damn it.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Like I was like, you know how to deal with adversity. Why is this shit knocking you down again?
Yeah.
Why are you being silent again? Why are you kind of back into a space that didn't feel good?
Is the challenge just the pain of losing your son coming back, or is it just other challenges in life arising?
No, other challenges for sure. So, that pain of losing Jake is something that I feel like I will always have. And that's because I love him, and I will always love him, and I'll always be his mother. And that pain is never going to subside for me. Right. When I was diagnosed with breast cancer a couple of years ago. And when that happened, I was really thinking about that before coming on today, because I was thinking about that day that the nurse care manager came in and told me, basically, like, we're 99.9% sure that you have breast cancer. And my first thought was not of me. My first thought was of my husband and my other son. And that kind of made me sad for myself today when I was thinking about that, because of course I'm going to think about them. They're my heart, right? Like that's going to happen. But that is where I stayed, I think, during that entire time when I was going through surgery and treatment. And I never let myself feel the feelings and the fear of what it meant to be diagnosed with cancer for the second time in my life. Right. And so I had to really climb back from that. I feel like I had to find myself again.
What steps if you can put it into words, steps did you take to kind of, find your rudder again? It's just, it would be so easy to just say, haven't you given me enough?
Well, I did say
that's enough.
I did say that. I think
but
Theresa
some
and I
people
said that
don't
together. Actually, when I first told her, was like, what the hell? How can this person have another thing happen to her?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, what I, first of all, I was not happy. I wasn't finding joy. And one of the things that I've really strived for in the last 7 years is to remember that joy and pain live in the same space. And I've been very intentional about not losing that piece of me because life has too many gifts in it, And so, but what I noticed is that I had lost that I wasn't finding happiness in my relationships, that I wasn't really being myself in my relationships because I was hiding this deep, dark secret of fear. And so my first step was to start talking about that. Quite honestly, was to just start sharing with people, which is really uncomfortable for me to share with people outside of my lovely therapist. I protect people too much, I think. And so then I don't deal with my stuff. So that was a big part of that, really starting to let the people closest to me know that the last year and a half had been really hard and that I was afraid. Going to the retreat in February was a really huge part of breaking free from not listening to myself. Big part of that.
What do you remember?
So I remember, the activity that we did at the table where we had to pick something.
Yeah.
I hated that activity. Every single thing about that activity.
By design.
But what I hated most about it was that I felt very, I like to be in control of things, as many of us with trauma like to be in control. But I did not like that blindfold being on me, at all. I was very physically uncomfortable, and I noticed it in my body, and I was like, okay, you might throw up. I was really uncomfortable.
No.
Also didn't say anything.
Right.
I mean, first you guys probably heard of how very uncomfortable I was. I wrote about it, but I didn't speak about it.
Yeah.
But that day, kind of leading up into doing the fire walk that night, was really interesting for me, just that whole process of internally preparing to do that walk. But then when I did the walk, this is where I feel like I really saw what was happening to me, if this makes sense. So when I did it, first of all, I was almost too intentional in my walk. I got some blisters on my feet, not little kisses, but I did burn my feet a little bit more than I expected. But I know it was because my first step was so hard. I wasn't breathing. I wasn't taking care of myself as I went through that. But then whenever I went across and I was on the other side, I remember looking out into that wide open field of snow, and I wanted to run into that field. I did not want to turn back to the group, but it was 12 below. And so
it was crazy cold.
It was cold that day.
So I had to turn back. And I had to lean on somebody. And Theresa, by the grace of God, has been somebody that has been a trusted part of my journey and just held me. And I sobbed and sobbed and sobbed. And I hadn't done that. I had not done that since being diagnosed with cancer.
Wow. Oh my goodness.
Wow.
And it was such a release. But then when I reflected on it, such a release of doing that in front of two ladies that I also value very dearly, who I have intentionally let into my pain, was a really important part of listening to my body and allowing other people to see me.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. I have goosebumps everywhere. Yeah. No, it's powerful.
Yeah.
Yeah. The allowing, the surrender, the choosing, just so much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think about that whenever I notice myself closing up again.
Mm.
I think about how that felt to release that and to have that support. And so reaching out and just letting people know that I'm struggling. Like, that's not a bad thing. That's a human thing, but it's a hard thing for me.
Yeah. 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 I wish asking for help wasn't so difficult for us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Why do you suppose it is difficult, Jamie?
I think that there's a lot of reasons it's difficult for me personally. I just think my role in my family has been, people would come to me and ask me for support. And I never got into a comfortable habit of asking for support. But then certainly, it has been much harder since losing Jake for me to ask for support. And I think that there's a few reasons for that. One is because I am so protective of my people that I push my stuff aside a lot. I pretend to push it aside, right? It's still there eating my body away.
Yeah.
But I would feel like I was in survival mode for the first, couple of years after Jake was killed. And part of that survival mode was that I ignored what was happening to myself I was so focused on taking care, making sure everybody else was okay, making sure that our outcomes came out the way that we wanted them to for Jake. And I didn't really notice what was happening. Just even the physical signs of like grief and trauma. And now I'm like trying to really be intentional to recognize that so that I'm not trying to protect everybody else without protecting myself first.
Mm-hmm. Have you looked for ways to, it just strikes me. I had cancer too. It didn't require the treatment that you required, surgery, they caught it in time, that sort of thing. But I believe that not acknowledging, my pain was causative. That we bury that all inside and your body has no other way to tell you. Now, whether that's true or it's not true, I don't know. But I think, your realization of the release after 2 years of your fear and everything around getting the news that you had cancer and it was serious is like it just feels like a really good indicator. Hey, I need to look for ways to release, not bury this stuff and let it go as it comes up. So have you taken steps, or can you give us some guidance of how is it that as we go along, we do better about not just packing all that in?
Yeah, for sure. So obviously I'm a big believer that, that trauma impacts our physical body, and there's a strong connection between that. And even when I was diagnosed, I was like, shit, this is another sign of my trauma. Like I really felt that in my gut, just like that there was a real strong connection between what happened to me and being diagnosed with breast cancer. And so, and I'm actually currently listening to the book, When the Body Says No, which terrifyingly drives that home, that connection between trauma and many different physical chronic diseases and cancers. But anyway, so one of the things that I'm really trying to do, Walker, though, is to let my body feel things, if that makes sense. This is not something that I feel like, I've been a social worker for a long time. I've talked about trauma for a long time, and I wasn't doing any of the things that I talked about, until I was forced to do the things that I was talking about. And so even in the last couple of weeks, whenever I found out some things in regards to the legal situation with the person who killed Jake, I felt it in my body so strongly. And I was so taken aback by that. Like I thought for 2 days I was very nauseated, very sick. Which was to me, a really abnormal experience. Like I didn't remember that from my previous times of having to deal with the courts and the legal system and all of that. And so I actually did some writing about this because I was like, what is going on? Why is this such a different reaction? And I think it's because I'm allowing myself to feel that in my body.
Yeah.
Whereas I don't think for the first probably 2 years after I lost Jake, I don't think I really allowed those feelings to happen.
Yeah.
Or that, the emotions. And the other thing that I'm doing really differently is I'm telling people, and not just telling people like I'm reaching out because I need support, because I need people to support my family, but because I am struggling and I need people to know that. And previously I wouldn't have done that.
Sure.
I would have just worried about how everybody else was doing around the news.
Yeah. Isn't it funny how you can be, that's your training.
Yeah.
Right? How to deal with trauma. And so we know, but then we have to know again and know again and know again.
Yeah. Dang it.
Yeah.
We're so complex.
We are so complex. Ooh. Yeah. Wouldn't it be nice if our training kept us from experiencing trauma?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Wouldn't it be nice?
Yeah. Life would be a lot easier. But maybe not so. We would miss out on some things too.
We would, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, to me, it's a soul growth thing, and that's hard.
Yeah. Yeah. It's really, when I think about being authentic, I sometimes I think that word's overused, but it's the only word I can use to describe how I want people to see me. And I kind of refuse to be silenced again. And that's certainly what losing Jake has taught me, is that I do have a stronger voice, and I need to trust my intuition. I need to trust my own voice about how to manage my grief, how to manage the things that come up around him, how to manage myself in a workplace, how to just manage myself in my relationship, in my relationships with my husband, but with my friends, with my family. Like, even though it feels hard right now, I would take this over not feeling it.
Sure.
Yeah.
I think.
We are very complex, yes. This moment I do, this moment I don't.
You said joy resides with pain.
Yeah.
Can you tell me more about that?
Oh, for sure. For sure. Yeah. So when Jake was first killed, when losing a child, there's really nothing worse. I also losing him so violently and all of the things that have come with that. One of the things that I know about myself is I denied that for a long time. Like, I denied how bad it was, if that makes sense. And I don't know why I did that, but I'm not going to do that anymore. But as a part of that process of dealing with the pain of losing him, I had to really be intentional about recognizing that losing him, I didn't lose myself. I didn't lose the things that bring me joy. I lost one of them, but there's also lots of ways that I can celebrate him that still bring me joy. There's lots of, I have a husband, I have another child, I have friends and family, I have a life. And I don't want that life to be lived only from a point of pain, if that makes sense. And so finding ways to intentionally find joy and laughter. Like, I so believe that laughter in our lives is vital to our wellness, that I have to intentionally find that sometimes. I'm willing to do that. You're scaring me, Walker.
Really?
I feel like you have a big question or something on your mind.
What are you not saying?
It's the trial lawyer thing.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Sorry.
Fair.
Yeah.
No, being comfortable with silence is just something that I have to learn, the waiting and not feeling like I needed to have some, erudite response to your wisdom, how you're finding your way through all of that. So it's just giving you space.
Thanks.
Sorry, it made you feel uncomfortable.
It's okay. That's one of my things, not yours, I'm sure.
What am I supposed to say next?
Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's a big sharing.
Yeah.
Yeah. As I was listening, I was just thinking about the post that you made in the Facebook page about Jake and the writing the letters, and, reading through that. And I was just imagining like what I would say, remembering what I said 4 years ago. I mean, just, and I think about like the impact, like teaching how our words impact others. And we hear a lot about intention versus impact. And I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about like how our words can have impact and how do we convey to others that are in positions of authority the impact that this has had, not just on you and Jeff and Zane and immediate family, but the community, as well. And just all the people that are connected and following being authentic in that sharing, right? Not just saying words, right? Being intentional. And yeah, so it just makes me thoughtful and curious and reflective about what that, will look like in writing that letter.
Yeah, it's so interesting because I feel like I've written that letter 1,000 times.
Yeah.
Guessing
you have in your head at least.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the challenging thing for me, I think, is that listening to my voice and knowing that I will always have these challenges because it's not the natural order of thing that you lose your child when he's 17 years old.
Right.
I am constantly reminded that he's not here. Yeah. Constantly reminded of that. And that's where really knowing, like, I want to always honor that. And I think that that's some of the things that got lost in the last couple of years is I just wasn't honoring what my voice was telling me in regards to my body, in regards to him, in regards to how I want to show up in relationships. And as you said, like, how do you get this across to people who essentially have a position of power over you, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't have control over what happens next.
Right.
But I want them to understand how this has impacted my life and the lives of, as you say, so many other people. So I don't know what that looks like,
Is it okay if we give it context?
Sure.
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, there's a parole hearing for the man that killed Jake. He was sentenced to 15 years, but it's been 4 and he's up for parole.
Correct. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
One thing that I thought as you were speaking earlier, and I didn't want to jump to this until, you went there, but the asking the reaching out and asking people to write letters, or those who would be interested in helping you to join in a new group, was powerful. And one of those steps that you're talking about, asking for help, because that's a big ask to put yourself out there for that. I'm proud of you for doing it. And it was beautiful to see all the response too, right?
Yeah. Thank you.
So hopefully helpful.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, it is. It's a, I think, again, when I had to go through this, I feel like similar process initially, it was still fresh for everybody, and so the ask to me felt easier then. And also why?
Right.
Still my child, still the same need that I have. And so even putting together that ask took me a few more days than what it normally would have. Also because I don't want to bring up other people's trauma. And I know so many people have stuff around that. And so it was hard for me to say, well, I've had some reminders lately that I'm not alone in this journey of grief with Jake. And I need to put that in the forefront of my mind. Like, I'm not asking for something that they don't already have on their mind often, if this makes sense. A weird thing happened on Jake's death date, which is June 25th. For folks to know that there's a core group of boys that are Jake's best friends, that love him dearly, that we love dearly, that have shown up for us time and time again. And for some reason this year on the date of his death, I normally always text them and, check in, invite them to come over or whatever. But in my mind, I was telling myself, like, they're older, I need to give them space. This is what I was telling myself, is I need to give them space. But what happened is, around dinner time, Zane came up and he said, "Hey, can Zach and Anthony and Joe come over?" And I was like, "Yeah, I would love that." And he said, "Well, they're texting me and they want to know if it's okay."
Aww.
And it was a reminder to me that they need us just the same as we need them, right? I mean, they came over and, tore up all my leftover pasta, as they do. And but it was just what we needed.
Yeah.
What we needed, they hung out with Zane. And so that was my reminder that I'm not alone in this journey. And a lot of people have that impact. So don't be afraid to ask for the things that you need in those situations.
Sure.
Yeah. When you think about that process of it taking you a few more days to create the ask, do you remember what you were telling yourself about why it was harder to ask?
I don't want to be a burden to other people. I don't want. Sometimes I feel like I'm a lot. I'm a lot for other people to take in, and I don't. And sometimes I want to be a lot. Like, this is this balance that I have of like, and also I'm going to say Jake's name. I'm, and I know when I'm not doing so well, it is the times when I'm not speaking as a mother of two children, when I'm not keeping his voice in the forefront, but I tell myself a story of people. I'm too much for people sometimes. And I think that that's what was happening whenever I was trying to create that ask, is how do I ask for one more thing? How do I ask for people to show up again? Yeah, that's what it was.
Yeah.
Was there a point in that process, I mean, can you think of what it was, your inner knowing, that was like, okay, I can. It's okay to do this. I need to do this.
Well, I think it's interesting because, like, historically, when something would come up, or, I mean, you guys know me enough to know that I'm not shy about showing my love for both of my children. And I don't hesitate, to post a picture of the boys, or to have it, if something comes in my head that I want to share, I share it. And I do that because I want other people to know, like, you should share about the people you lose, that you love, that you should keep them present in your thoughts all the time. So I just want to normalize that. But I think that because my body was talking to me so strongly after I received the text about the upcoming date, I had to get right with myself before I posted an ask of somebody else. And I don't mean like, right, like I don't think I'm fixed. Obviously, I'm still like I know that the next, 2.5, 3 months, however long it takes for us to know what the decision is, I know that that's going to be hard.
Yeah.
I had to figure out what was going on with me before I asked something of someone else so that I could be present.
Yeah.
So did you feel, I think you said it was nausea. Did you feel that dissipate over the few days it took and then you got to a place of stillness, or what was the experience for you?
What happened was, so I got the text while Jeff and I were on our road trip to Wisconsin. I got the text like the third day in. I was like, well, shit, can't do anything without a reminder. But I intentionally made a choice to set it aside because there was nothing I could do. Like I wanted to be present in that trip. And so I didn't think about it like how I needed to respond to the victim's advocate. I needed to do all these things, but I just said no. I told Jeff about it. And then I said, let's not. There's nothing we can do right now. We need to take this time for ourselves. And so as soon as we got home, though, is when I started getting nauseated, is when I was like, oh, maybe I'm getting sick. Like but I'm not sick. It's not the way it feels, but I could feel it in my throat. I could just feel all of those things. And so at the first day, I really didn't know what was going on. I really thought, man. But then I just started really thinking about it and noticing it. And the first thing I did was I told Jeff that I was really struggling. And I said, I don't feel good. I feel like I'm going to throw up. I feel like my stomach is upset. And he said, what's going on? And historically, I would say, I don't know. But I did know.
Yeah.
I did know. And so I told him, I said, I just think that this coming up is messing with my body. My body is reminding me of how hard it was last time. And that's a really different process for me, is trusting that I can give other people my shit and they can hold it. So that was a really big step for me. It seems like you're like, that's your partner. You should be able to tell them that. Not me. No way, man. I'm not gonna disrupt his place with my stuff. So that was probably the first step for me in doing that. And then I just slowly started reaching out to my people to let them know, hey, this happened. This is the date, because everybody knew it was coming. We just didn't know when.
Right.
And so my people just reminded me, like, we're there for you. We're there for you. And I think it was just that process of having those reminders that led me to be able to make that ask of other people. So I'm not done asking either. Yeah. By the way, that was just a small group, but the bigger group will be hearing from me soon.
Yeah. Lovely.
Yeah.
So let me ask you this. When you took it to your husband, and you gave him your shit, how'd he do?
Well, he gave me a hug.
Yeah.
Yeah. He said, we're going to get through this. It's that reminder, particularly in my core people of Jeff and Zane, like, even if we don't deal with it the same way, because we're all three very different people and our process has been very different and hard. I mean, it's been different and hard. They're the two other people that get it more than anyone else.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and we've survived a lot together.
I think it's, what we tell ourselves about, our worries about whether this will burden other people who love us and, those sorts of things. It's just part of our learning in life, right? I mean, you've been married forever.
Yes, I have, Walker.
And I think, what I would guess is that, up in your thinking mind, you could rationalize that out. Well, of course, Jeff is going to be understanding and, he can take it and we've been through this, but for whatever reason, that doubt creeps in, even though it's just the part of the journey. But you trust it, right?
Yeah, sort of. I mean, the truth is that our journeys have been so hard individually that protecting is about that too. I don't want to burden with more pain and more stuff because the struggle is real. And my struggle is real too.
Yes.
So,
yeah.
People just don't see it the same, right? Because it's because I'm really good at, masking it.
Yeah. You learned really well to carry it all. Yeah. But, learning to trust that he could be there for you in that way has been its own process. Yeah. I mean, because we can think we have trust in our relationship until we have a tragedy.
So I remember whenever, like in the week after we lost Jake, one of the first things that I said to him was, so we're not going to get divorced over this. And I remember him looking at me like, what the hell? Why are you even thinking about that? Right. Well, it's because I knew, because of what I did for a living, that that divorce was a high likelihood for couples who lost children.
Yes.
And so that has always actually played in the back of my mind in our relationship. And I did a lot of reading about why does that happen? How does, what are the things to be aware of? And so one thing that I can testify to is that it is because the grief process is so very different for each person, and particularly for couples, and how, in our situation, how Jeff is the male and Jamie is the female, and how that is a very different process. And we have very different personalities. We've always had we were just, different people. And so, that's been the challenge, I think, is sometimes not acknowledging my own grief for fear of worrying about his grief and his trauma and his process, So how do I make those two match?
Yeah.
Come back together.
Yeah.
Gosh, it just feels like it would be harder for people with training, You're trained as a social worker. Teresa's an LMFT, and you have this whole base of knowledge. And so you're anticipating all these different potential outcomes in relationship based on something that happens that the rest of us are oblivious to.
So I disagree with that. Actually, I have been grateful that I have known what I knew before, right from the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
I do think that it's, quite frankly, what helped me breathe in the beginning and survive in the beginning. I think it's what helped me to do the work to find myself, if that makes sense. I think that one of the gifts that I have is that I've talked to a lot of child loss survivors now, and oftentimes, people connect me with them because I know what it feels like. And also I have a little bit of knowledge about it. When I hear their stories and I think about what they have to learn as well as grieve, if that makes sense. Like, sure. I feel really fortunate that I already had some of the learning done. It helped me, simple things like in the first probably couple months when I realized, like, you need to get off this couch and run again, move your body, because that is connected to your brain. That was a really intentional thought that I had. And I don't think I would have had that if I didn't know the connection between taking care of your body and trauma. Right. And so, some of those things definitely helped me to move forward.
Yeah. Yeah. Tell me what you were thinking, Walker, when you said that. What were you thinking about it being so hard?
Just I guess blissful ignorance of not knowing how bad it could get on the relationship is, I guess, where I was coming from, knowing all the potential ways that it could disintegrate when you lose a child.
Well, I think if I didn't know that, I don't think that we'd still be married.
Yeah.
Quite frankly. I mean, I think that is why people don't stay married, because they don't understand the responses as being a normal part of healing, that it's a conscious decision to give each other grace when we don't like how someone is responding.
Right.
I mean, it is in general in life, but certainly while I intimately know what it feels like to lose a child, I know that as Jamie, who lost Jake.
Right.
I don't know that as Jeff, who lost Jake.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm always going to honor that. But I don't think I would have done that had I already not been in the field.
Sure. I guess the answer for the rest of us is go get help.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. And then you have that whole learning curve.
And go get help and get good help. Right. Because I think that we have a lot of story, at least in our culture, about what the grief process should look like. And we have books that are written that tell us how it should go. And it's so individual, the process. And so someone who really, I feel like, isn't telling us where we should be in the grief process. For me, my thought always is, are you stuck? Right? Not where are you? Just,
right.
Are you stuck? And I think that can be hard. I think even as clinicians, it can be difficult to watch our clients be in so much pain that we try to, I don't know, persuade them to not be in so much pain.
That's why the silence makes me uncomfortable, Walker.
Yeah. No, it's difficult. But to me, that's that trusting, our knowing. I mean, how many people I've worked with over the years who are like, well, the therapist I was seeing told me this is where I should be. And it's like, oh, well, but part of you's here because part of you realized that it wasn't helpful to you, someone telling you what your process should be. So, but yeah, reach out, get educated. But I think the knowing piece of that process, like what is your body telling you? Which then makes me think about that piece for you, Jamie. If you go back over the last, 7 years, how do you feel like that part of you has grown?
The inner knowing part? Or
the inner knowing part.
So, I mean, 8 years ago, I wouldn't even, like I would have said, you're foo-foo stuff full of inner knowing. What do you mean? What? That's like hippy dippy stuff, right? I mean, 8 years ago, I hadn't done any of this work at really looking at myself and thinking about, I was thinking about, again, as I was just preparing to chat with you guys, I was thinking about like this idea I had in my mind of who I was as a person. And like, I was this strong woman and like this weird thing about that prior to losing Jake. And now that I've done this work of recognizing my voice and trying to be authentic and I'm like, man, you were a scared little girl.
Mm.
And I was not authentic to who I was. I was not. And so the process has been really forced upon me, I think, during the first couple of years where it was, I had to be a voice for Jake. That's really, what my focus was. I had to be a voice for him, for Zane. What happened is, as I was doing my own work and as I was thinking about my own grief process, and, I realized I needed to be a voice for myself.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not something I never had thought about before is how do you pay attention to what your body is telling you? How do you pay attention to what your mind is telling you? what you know is right, what you know is true. And then how do you say it? How do you say it? And so I think that that's been the journey is the last 7 years is just acknowledging like all these things that had to change in my life. They would have never changed had I not lost Jake. I believe that in my heart. Like I believe that, I've had to learn about setting boundaries with people that I love dearly. I've had to learn about speaking up for myself in my workplace, like all these things that I feel like I probably neglected prior. I just didn't know, but it still was like, there was so much more that I could have been doing. I'm grateful that I have the chance to find myself now and to listen to myself. But it's a journey.
Yeah.
It's a journey.
Yeah. When you were talking about that and you kept saying I had to, I was thinking you chose to again and again and again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
True.
For you now, are there daily things that you do to support yourself, or is it kind of what do I need today?
Just a little bit of both. So meditation is always really hard for me and also really vital for me. And so I've had to really figure out how can I do this and also be true to what I know about myself. And so some simple things that I've really put into practice are breathing exercises and not like, don't sit down for 20 minutes and practice a breathing exercise, but just practice breathing and noticing your breath. When you texted me with deep breaths, I was like, yes, girl, that's what I've been doing. Lots of deep breaths because I'm really good at not doing that. And I feel like that's where it stores up in my body too. So I've been working on practicing that. Writing is something that has really helped me a lot. And so sometimes I use journal prompts, but sometimes it's just like, I need to sit down and get this out of my head. And so I'll free flow with some things around that. Sometimes, I do that in my blog too. Sometimes for me, like that part of that mindfulness is again, I want other people to recognize and normalize trauma. And so sometimes my writing goes into blogs, but sometimes it's just like, this is mine.
Yeah.
So I do that. Nature has really become important to me in the last few years. Just being able to take a walk, being able to sit in nature, being able to recognize the beauty of nature. Jake's in nature. I see him there.
Yeah.
And so the more I'm able to have my mind be at peace, the more I'm able to also feel him, I notice. And so that's important to me.
Yeah.
You mentioned when the body says no. And are there other resources that you found really helpful that you could share with people, things that they could turn to for some learning?
For sure. So one of my favorite books that I've read in regards to grief is Finding Meaning by David Kessler, because he talks a lot about how our society has put grief as this like linear process, and we should be like from point A to point D in 1.2 years and life is good, right? Essentially. So, so when I read his book, and I remember actually I used to teach a class on grief when I worked at a substance use facility. I used to teach the stages of grief, and I'm like, why am I even teaching this? Again, I didn't have a voice then to say like, this is bullshit. But he talks about that. He actually worked with Kubler-Ross. And so he talks about like that. First of all, those stages weren't even meant for the living. They were meant for the dying. Like,
wow.
Somebody who's going through the dying process goes through stages of grief, which makes more sense to me when you think about the stages of grief. So he talks about that, but you can't apply those stages if you draw the squiggliest circle up, down, in between line ever, because that's what it looks like. And so that really resonated with me. But then he talks about this 6th stage of finding meaning. How do you find meaning again after you've experienced significant loss? And so for me, that book was really, really powerful. And it's something that I actually lean on a lot still, just to have reminders. Coincidentally, he lost a son as well. And so his story obviously resonates with me for that reason.
Yeah.
I really like the book by Oprah Winfrey and Bruce Perry, What Happened to You, as a book that you don't have to be a doctor to read. When the Body Keeps the Score, everybody recommends that book. And that book is really hard.
It is hard.
I struggled with it too.
Yeah. It's good, but
Nobody
it's hard.
says how hard it is.
Yeah,
right?
the languaging.
Right. Yeah. The language in it is hard. And I feel like that What Happened to You, it's teaching the same thing in a way that that anybody can understand, like what's happened to your body. Because that part is so important to me.
Yeah.
So I would recommend that one. I probably have about 30 others. But I'm just going to stop there.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, that's really helpful suggestions. Yeah.
Yeah, we're going to have to compile a reading list from all the recommendations people are making.
Yeah.
Because I hear new things all the time.
Yeah. Walker this morning, he said, "What's that stack of books?" And I said, "Oh, those are all the people that are coming up, the books they've written, like all the guests." And he was like, "Oh,
better get to work.
You got some reading to
do." Yeah. Lots of reading. So thank you so much, Jamie.
Thank you. Thank you both for everything. I love you both dearly, and I'm so very grateful.
Yeah, I love you too.
Love you too, Jamie. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you for joining us today. We are excited to explore life with you. We encourage curiosity, self-growth, and we strive to be more compassionate every day.